Welcome to Talent Titans, the podcast where we bring you entrepreneurs and leaders from the global staffing industry. I'm your host, Suki Sodi. Now let's jump right on in and welcome today's Titan. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Talent Titans. Today I'm excited to talk with Zag Dutton, founder of Career Connections Canada. She's been in the business a very long time, so she's seen so many ups and downs, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Zag, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having
You're
me.
welcome. For those that don't know you, just want to tell everybody who you are, what you are, where you are.
So I'm based out of Mississauga as an organization. We work across Canada. I started Career Connections in 1995. So, I was 2 years old. I started strictly as a permanent search firm. I had come out of 10 years working for another organization where I had started 2 branches from scratch for them, and I had taken over a 3rd branch to develop it because it was having issues. And after 10 years of that, I thought, you know what? Time to start off on my own, see what I can do. If I can do it for somebody else, basically 3 times, I should be able to do it for myself at least once. So we started off as permanent search, and about 3 years later, the demand from clients that we were doing permanent searches with started to grow on the temporary side. So they were asking us, could we take care of their temp side? Could we do this? Could we do that? Because they trusted us. They knew how we work. So it was an easy transition. So we did start working on the temporary side. And now I think we're about 50-50. 50% perm, 50% temp. Without a word of a lie, the temp takes a lot more maintenance, so it takes up a lot more time for my team to get through than the perm does. Perm searches take a long time in terms of finding the right person, but you're not hand-holding as much. Whereas the temporary side, temps are like pets. You get them when they're babies and they never actually grow up. So
Never heard it said like that.
Yeah, they continue to evolve with you. However, they never seem to get to the point where they want to take a step outside of that comfort circle. So I think of temps as being in 2 different areas. So some temps are temps by necessity. So they're doing it to pay the bills while they look for something on the permanent side. And there are other temps who just truly enjoy being temporary employees. So they'll continue to do it that way. And as some of my temps who were recently asked by one of our clients, do you want to become a permanent employee? And they said no. And he said, well, why? And they said, well, because this way we come to work, we do what you need us to do, and we can take vacation when we want. We don't need permission. We can go on vacation as long as we want. And if we don't want to come to work on a particular day, then we just call Zag and say, I'm not feeling up to work today, and she deals with it. So basically,
Great point.
They never actually grow up. So there are people who are professional temps.
It's a
That's what
lifestyle
they do.
decision, though, isn't it, for them?
It is. And lifestyle is becoming such a big conversation for everybody. Everybody has a different way of thinking about what it is that they want out of life. Do they want to achieve these lofty goals on the permanent side and become CEOs? Or do they just want to come in and do what is needed and go home and not take it home and not sleep with it or not sleep with it, whichever it might be. So it really is a lifestyle decision.
Before we talk about business as such, right? As a business and you personally play a really important role in the local community. How do you see small business like yourself contributing to community growth and development? And I guess, why is it such an important part of your model?
So I think business has a role to play in every community. I think we basically, especially as a small business, we're upfront. So yes, we are competing with large organizations that are global or
Yep.
international or even national. But as a local business, as a small business, you have a responsibility to make sure that everybody on every side of your business feels that they are being treated with integrity, with respect, and that they're being heard. And this doesn't just mean our temporary employees or our permanent search candidates. It also means our clients, because there isn't anywhere for me to
Yep.
hide. So I don't have a name that is not known by everybody. Anybody who's ever dealt with Career Connections knows the name Zag Dutton, and they know that they just need to pick up the phone and get her immediately. They don't have to send
Yep.
messages through a portal to get permission, to get somebody else to reach out to me for me to call them back. They know where they can reach me. So, in the same token, they know where to find me. If they know where to find me, I need to be able to walk the talk and talk the walk. So I need to be able to say that what I'm doing is the best that I can think of for all concerned. And strangely enough, small business means that if you're recognized enough, if enough people know about you, you can be at the grocery store and somebody can approach
Good
you.
point.
So you have to be very careful. Be kind to everybody, including that grocery
100%.
store checkout
It's so
clerk.
true because small business, like I look at it, and there's our local butchers, right? It's out of
Yeah.
the way. Probably a little bit more expensive, right, to
Mm-hmm.
get my grass-fed beef from the butchers. So when I'm
Yeah.
doing groceries, they have it there. But unless like I literally got to go straight home, I'll do my groceries,
Yeah.
then I'll drive to the butchers. You pay more, but
Because
it's
you know that.
exactly, and you know the
Yeah.
quality and all of that good stuff,
Yeah.
right? I remember one, can't remember whether it's
Absolutely.
Christmas or Thanksgiving. I forgot to order the turkey. Oops. Um, oops. And I rang the butchers. I was like, oh my God, I've forgotten. And he's like, Suki, I'll sort it out for you. And he did,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I'm not saying the Superstore or Metros wouldn't have done the same, but it's building that community, right? Which brings me on to perfectly segues nicely into my next question. In an economic landscape that is very challenging for small businesses, I mean, there's no denying
Mhm.
that. How do you believe they can leverage their size and agility to provide that value, that unique value that they may not necessarily get from a box store or a large agency, or whichever way you want to look at that?
So agility, I think, is key for a small business. So we can do things because we're smaller. There are far less layers to go through. So if we want to make a policy change or a change in how we approach a certain problem, it doesn't have to go through 10 layers of permissions that may take days, weeks, months, maybe even the entire year before we can make a change in how we process things. Yes, it's important to have policies, it's important to have processes in place for if this happens, this is how you do it, this is what you do. But it's also important to recognize that everything is different. Every situation is different. So you may have a client who has an attendance problem with the temps, and you can, as a small, agile organization, you can make that change. Think about how you're going to deal with it. Talk to the temps, talk to the temp, to the client, talk to your team. It can all happen in the space of 1 hour, and then you formulate a plan for attacking that particular issue. And it may mean having the client do something differently on site, because one of the struggles with temporaries is that they don't understand we can't see them.
Yeah.
we are not physically there. So if they arrive late, we don't know that. But if the supervisor or the client doesn't tell us, we won't know that because the temp is never going to call and say, yeah, hey, I was late today. I'm
Hey, I
really
messed
sorry. I
up.
won't do that again.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I've had people say to me, Zag, it wasn't me. I wasn't late. The bus was late.
Well, technically, that's
And I'm
true, right?
it is true, but my point is I don't pay the bus. I pay you. If you are late and it's the bus's fault, you need to take the earlier
Yeah,
bus.
yeah, fair point, fair
That's
point. But that,
just the way it is. But we can do it all in the space of one day. We can figure out a way to deal with it, address it, and put together a plan that will work towards the future sort of solving of that issue. Larger organizations have a lot of layers. So, in order for recruiter ABC over in Vancouver to make a change, they have to go through so many layers, and then that person at the top may say, okay, but if we do that, then we have to change it across the board. Well, we don't really, because the problem is in
yeah,
Vancouver, not in
you're
all of
right.
Canada. So that is the biggest sort of impedance to agility. If you can't get out of your own way, you can't be agile. You cannot respond to the client quickly
No,
enough.
great point. But you're right, because as a small business, you can, and the decision maker, i.e., you in this case, or me in my case,
Yeah.
if I want to get flexible on payment terms, I can do that. If I want to get
Yes.
flexible on some other term, I can do that. I can ring, if I need to ring a lawyer up, I can say, hey, da 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 da,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I guess also as a smaller agency, you and being in the local community, just tie that back in. You know everyone firsthand, as you were saying,
Hmm.
right? It makes a
Yeah.
big difference. Now I get it. Large agencies, some clients want national coverage. Great, fantastic. That people that know me hear me say this all the time. There is plenty of room for everybody. There's a seat around the table for everybody. You just got to carve out
Yeah.
your piece. One of the mistakes I see
Yeah.
smaller agencies do, they try and be everything to everybody,
Yes.
right? And then they become an expert of nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they kind of lose that unique selling point, that why they use them. Because now, well, what are you? Are you a temp agency? Are you IT? Are you finance? Are you general staffing? And I guess it also confuses the candidates,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Oh, absolutely. Because I get calls from people all the time and they say, so I really don't dabble in IT. And one of my things is that I will only work on things that I can understand. Because if I can't understand it, I can't find
Yep,
it. So people have difficulty with that because I get a lot of people from areas that I don't do anything in, like
yep,
IT. Well, I'm in IT. I understand that, but I really don't have anything in IT or banking,
yep,
for example. It's not my area. And I would be misleading you if I said that I could help you find something in IT or in banking because I don't have any connections in those areas, number one. Number two, I don't understand anything about those parts of the working
yep.
world. So I can't, when a client says to me, I need somebody who can do this, and I don't understand what it is, I'm not going to be able to identify it when I'm looking for it. And it could be staring me in the face.
And that's why clients use an
But
agency, because you're doing the way I certainly look at it. We do that first round of interviews. We don't just screen. Those of us that do our jobs
yeah,
properly, we do the first round of
yeah,
interviews. So I get that. If you're not technically minded, you have no understanding of programming languages, for argument's sake, right?
yeah,
Are you really doing your client justice?
exactly.
Yeah. So no, that completely makes sense to me. So let me ask you this. What key traits or practices have helped you maintain resilience and keep your focus? Because, like, look at it. We used to get a recession or sort of like a dip every 9, 10 years. We get it, it feels like we get it every 9, 10 months at the moment. So how
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
maintain that
There is,
resilience?
for us, I think it's staying true to who we
Okay.
are. We talked about the ability to react quickly, but also equally important is the ability to understand the difference in problem A in environment ABC and problem A in environment EFG. So from up high, the problem may seem that it will look and it will sound exactly the same. So there is no difference sort of at the outset. But when you look a little bit deeper, you find out that there are other issues, like there may be a supervisory issue, there may be a lack of respect issue. They present differently in different environments, depending on whether it's a warehouse blue collar environment or a professional environment. They will present differently. So you have to be able to think of a different way to deal with that particular problem. But I think that some of the things that really work for us is taking the time to speak with both sides of the equation. So let's talk to the client and find out what they're experiencing. And let's talk to the candidate and find out what they are experiencing. Because whether they're a permanent candidate for a particular role or they are a temporary who's working for us, what they experience and how they view things is going to be very different. And so if we talk to them and we find out candidate ABC had an interview with so and so and they came back and they said it was terrible. And you find out from them what was it that made you feel it was terrible, and they give you a description of what it was, what the supervisor said in the meeting, and so on and so forth. Now you can fine tune your search, because what that supervisor said to this candidate that made them feel terrible, maybe that's not the kind of candidate we're looking for. Maybe we're looking for somebody entirely different, somebody who views things in an entirely different manner. And now we take these things, these answers and experiences, and we put them in as part of our interview for future candidates for that particular client. So being able to identify and move through the different ways of looking at it and making it make sense for each particular environment is very different. And it could, and the same thing can happen for the temporary side, that you could have a temp who does exceptionally well in the same environment and then another temp who does terribly. And so then you have to find out, what is the problem? Is it the temp's attitude? Is it their work style or their level of production, speed of work, whatever it happens to be? To find any of that out, you need to talk to both parties. You need to find out from the supervisor, what are you seeing? And you need to find out from the temp, what are you seeing and hearing and feeling? And then decide from there, where is the real issue? And then use that in your future recruits for that particular environment. We have to make sure that we're taking into consideration all parameters and the desired outcomes, and be able to marry them so that we can make the best selection for that particular client. So everybody may say, well, I want a forklift driver, but forklift driver A might make a great fit for environment A, but they might make a terrible fit for
Culture, right?
environment B.
That's culture, right? It's just getting that culture.
Even intent. Culture counts, even
But
intent.
what about you've been doing this what, 20,
It'll be 30
30
years
years?
in
30
May.
years. In those 30 years, there's been so much disruption in the economy. Then we had COVID, Y2K, then the job boards were going to kill us and all everything.
Yeah.
How have you managed to work through that, like that resilience piece? Because the number of hits that our industry seems to take from whichever threat that might be just seems to be continuous. And I'm seeing a lot of people give up. right? But
Yeah.
how have
Yeah.
you managed to stay so resilient and work through it and come out stronger the other side as a small business? COVID, for example, last year, for example, was a terrible year for most of us.
Well, you know what? Along the way, there have been a lot of challenges. So, yes, COVID was a massive challenge. I literally, through COVID, I had a phone system. And then, of course, found out pretty much on the turn of a dime. I was in BC at the end of February of that year, came back and found out we were going to have to shut down operations in office. And I thought, oh my God, I don't even have a phone system. So now I have a choice. I have a phone system that nobody can take home with them. I have a choice. I can get everybody a cell phone, which is going to be ridiculously expensive on airtime and data and all of those other great things. Or I can source a VoIP phone system. So at the time, we were with one of Canada's largest companies for telephone services. They would not sell VoIP systems to anybody who needed less than 10 dedicated
Is that right?
lines.
Didn't know that.
And I said, oh, well, that's not going to work for me. So I got on the phone and called, I think, 10 different VoIP services and did rapid
Yep.
interviews. So you have to be prepared to move really, really quickly. So that was my first experience with COVID. And then the rest of COVID was just horrific because of you needed to keep everybody safe. But I was in a essential environment, so I worked a lot with pharmaceutical companies. They didn't have an option to stay home, and they had production facilities. So we reinvented the wheel with the clients, redid the scheduling, did all of that, put together documentation for keeping everybody safe, made sure that we had measures in place to keep everybody far apart. So a production line that may have taken 8 people to run was now going to run on 4 people. And they had to slow everything down, but that's what was necessary to make it work. Job boards came on, and much before COVID, and the whole industry thought that's it. It is the end of recruiting, and recruiters are a thing of the
Yep.
past. I'm sure you
Yep.
remember that. It was a scary time, but fairly quickly, I mean, not quickly enough for us, obviously, because I think recruiters are by nature pretty impatient, but fairly quickly, we figured out that clients were posting on job boards and saying, oh no, we don't need any help right now, we're okay, we're going to post this on the job board,
And
we're pretty sure we're going to find somebody. And then they found out that they post and they get 500 resumes for a basic clerical job, and it only got worse as they posted. They got in more and more resumes. They discovered that they literally needed to hire additional people on their team just to vet these resumes, which became impossible. They weren't going to do that. So they
well, it
came
was
back
supposed
to
to save them
agencies.
costs, right? It actually increased cost.
It increased cost, it increased stress, it increased manpower
Yep.
requirements. It was a huge problem for them. So we managed to outlive that problem. And then the economies, we get downturns and upturns on a regular basis. And in our industry, Suki, as you know, it's always feast or famine. So you're either always, you have too many candidates for the number of jobs that you have, or you have too many jobs for the number of candidates that you have. So it's always been feast or famine. So I think as an industry, we're pretty adept at adapting for the most part, at least the smaller ones. The smaller agencies are adept at adapting because we don't have an option. So now the latest thing is all of the political
Yep.
stresses. So we have a lot of stress coming out of the US. We're in Canada. Canada tends to be very affected by anything that happens in the
Big time.
US. And I've often gone to conferences in the US and people ask me, why do you're in Canada? You don't even work in the US. Why are you going to conferences in the US? And I tell them, because honestly, whatever is happening in the US is going to be happening in Canada. It might be a year later, but it is going to be happening. So we need to be, in order to stay ahead of it, we need to know what it
Yep.
is.
Great point.
And then, of course, we've got the current stresses, the economy, we've got AI, which is becoming something that is like the job board fear that we're all thinking, oh my God, is AI going to be the death of us? I think as a small agency, we have to take a step back and say, okay, listen, it's been almost 30 years and you've been through all of these other things. You need to take a look at what it is. You need to make friends with it and understand it and figure out how it works so that you can work with it and make it work for you. And I think that's probably the best way to overcome anything. You need to figure it out. You need to learn how to use it. You need to figure out how to use it in your business or whatever parts of it you can use in your business to help you to overcome it and continue on peacefully working with
I love
it.
that because you're not kind of saying you're kind of saying embrace it, whatever the turmoil that comes, right? Whether it's
Yeah,
technology, whether it's the US politics, whether it's COVID. Okay, it's here. What is it? Let me dissect it. Let me absorb it. And then work with the bits you can and dump the rest. In
yeah,
essence, is what you're saying.
yeah, exactly what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
And I think you make a really strong point there because I'll use COVID and the current tariff threat from the US. It's really interesting because there's this shock factor. And yes, COVID, none of us had ever seen anything like that. So I totally get that one. And this is what I'm saying to people, look, if you can pivot with COVID, something that shut the country down,
Yeah,
the US is nothing. The threats are nothing. That's exactly what they are, threats. They're politicians. I don't
yeah.
trust their politicians. I don't trust our politicians. Right?
Oh, 100%.
But I do
Yeah,
trust they're going to figure something out.
yeah. Because they don't have an option. They
Correct.
can't implode.
Correct. Right? So they'll figure something out. So any small business owner listening to this, listen to what Zag just said. Look at it, embrace it, dissect it, work with it. And working with it doesn't necessarily, let's just confirm, to me, working with it doesn't mean you're just like, oh my God, I'm just going to accept it all. And, you know, no, to me,
Yeah,
it means, okay, so this is it. What's the opportunity for me?
yeah.
Whatever that might look like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you can't be all things, as you said earlier in our conversation. You cannot be all things to all people. You have to pick what parts make sense and take that on board and do the best you can with that piece. You cannot. AI is such a huge piece right now. It is reaching into all the corners that we didn't necessarily think about.
It's true, though.
And we're not going to be able to control it. We're not going to be able to use all of it, but there are going to be pieces that every industry and every company will be able to use. And so it's important to dissect, as you said, and decide what parts make the most sense to add value to your business and that will help you to add value to your clients'
You're
businesses.
right, because if we just take AI as an example, larger companies have somebody or a department dedicated to, I'm
Yeah,
just going to call it technology, right? The whole spectrum. You and I don't.
yeah,
And I look at it, and my husband's in the tech world, and forever. like I get, okay, this, right? And it's all important stuff, but I don't sit there reading it all and I don't worry about it. I just say to
Yeah,
him, you know my business, which one should I listen to? Right. And then I'll
yeah,
listen to that piece, whether it's a YouTube video he sent me or whether it's an article or whatever it might be. Right.
yeah,
I'll be like, okay, I get that. Now, and then just dump the rest. I know people that are
yeah,
sitting there and they're just learning AI. Well, by the time you learn something today, AI's moved forward.
yeah,
And again, to be clear, I'm not saying you shouldn't embrace it, but you also got a business to run. As a small agency, we have a business to run, right? A large one
yeah,
has somebody dedicated to that, and that's fantastic. They've got the money, more power to them. But as a small business, you
yeah,
just can't get hung up if I come back to the tariffs. Yes, manufacturing is going to get hit. We know that,
yes,
right? And some others, there's going to be some knock on effects, but let's just pick on manufacturing. So
yeah,
pivot, because
yeah,
I don't believe it'll happen the way saying it'll happen. But if you use this opportunity to pivot now, can you imagine if you pivot into something closely related, right? So suddenly now,
yeah.
I'm not saying go and do technology or pharmaceutical or nursing. You've got another revenue stream, and
Hmm.
you'll still get revenue from this one. Might even be better 'cause we don't know what that's going to look like. But if you're sitting there not doing anything, there's only one
Yeah,
way your business is going to go, and that's down.
that's right. You can never afford, especially as a small business, you can never afford to do nothing. You have to always, I mean, it can be overwhelming, but you always have to keep an eye out on what is happening around you. And again, take the pieces that you can make use of and find a way to make them work. Integrate them into your current business and move on the best you can. Not a single organization out there, whether it's in the recruiting industry or any other industry, is ever going to make 100% use of everything that is out there.
I think I think it was last year's Canadian Staffing Summit. I actually asked the CEO panel all the tech,
Uh,
right? So they're big companies, they've got these tech departments, right? You need to put this tech in, this tech in, this tech in. And don't quote me, but if I remember correctly, all four CEOs said that they've implemented all the tech, and out of all the tech that they've implemented, something like only 58% was being used or something. The rest,
yeah,
I thought, everyone's like, we need this tech, we need this tech. They've gone and acquired it. For whatever reason, it's not being used, it's obsolete, whatever the case might be, right? It goes back, just because somebody else has something shiny, you don't necessarily have to
yeah,
have it. And
yeah,
LinkedIn's a great example. LinkedIn's a great example.
yeah,
Everybody is just constantly posting on LinkedIn, and it's clickbait, right? It's a shock factor, and it's like, okay, great, have a LinkedIn strategy. If your strategy is the shock factor, it is a strategy. I personally don't buy into it, but it is a strategy. Well, that becomes all consuming. Feel like keeping
mm-hmm,
updated on tech, it becomes all consuming. And as a small business, you have to be very careful, because at some stage the consumer is going to overtake the doing, as you said. But you also can't bury your head
mm-hmm,
in the sand and say, hey, tech ain't going to replace this. Tech ain't going to be able to do this. Tech ain't going to be able to do that. I agree. I don't think it's going to replace the whole thing. Certainly not in my lifetime, I don't think. But there's a lot of stuff
no,
that tech is replacing in our industry and the process. So it's no, you can't. What I'm saying is you can't ignore it neither.
yeah, yeah, no, you can't. You cannot stick your head in the sand and hope it all goes away by the time you pull it back out. That's just not how things
Yep. I
work.
mean, that's generally in life as well, right? I want to go back to the
Hmm.
candidate experience you were talking about earlier. Studies show that about 78% of candidates say the overall candidate experience is an indicator of how a company values their employees, its people. How
Hmm.
does Career Connections ensure that you're delivering a top tier candidate experience? And what impact have you seen this focus have on your recruiting outcomes?
So I've never actually analyzed that
Okay.
statistic personally. However, I agree with you that how you treat
Hmm.
people candidates, whether they be for permanent or temporary, is a huge indicator of how you value whatever it is that they bring to the table.
Okay.
And for us, I think that that is best served by open communication. So everyone who comes to us is expecting help in one way or
Yep.
another. Typically, they want us to help them find a job, whether it be a permanent job or a temporary job. That's what they come to us for. But the fact is that we can't help everybody. So it might be their skill set, it might be what our clients are looking for at the time. It could be any number of reasons why we might not be able to help them. I think we owe it to them to be honest and have the difficult discussions. We all love to have the easy
Yep.
discussions. My client wants to hire you. I have a temp job for you,
We
whatever
all
it
love
might
giving good
be.
news.
And we all love giving good news. And a lot of times, my own internal team, one of their favorite answers for many of them is, why do you want to do this? I love helping people. You quickly find out that that's not always going to be the case. Yes, we all love helping people, but when you have somebody that you're talking to and you know you cannot help them, you owe it to them out of just common mutual respect to tell them, I can't help you, and this is why.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you can't say that respectfully and kindly. But if you just say to them, okay, well, I'll call you when we have something, and you know you're never going to be able to
Yep.
help them, you're not helping them, because all that's going to happen is they're going to call you every week, every day, every month, whatever their schedule seems to be, and the frustration will continue to grow on both
And they'll
sides.
appreciate it because we're wasting their time as well, right? And false
Yeah.
hope and all that
So
stuff.
yeah. So I really don't believe in giving anybody false hope. If we can't help them, tell
Yep.
them. Tell them now. Give them some resources on what else they can do. Give them a path to go, but don't leave them with false hope. So I think being able to have the difficult discussions, to deliver the negative news when it is necessary, is very
And none of us
important.
like delivering bad news, right? Normally people don't like.
So
Like I've got country manager interviews happening for on one of my clients at the moment. I've got to tell a really good candidate that he's not moving forward. I am dreading that call, right?
yeah, I
Yeah,
bet.
I'm
I bet.
because it's a great guy. But again, gonna give him the feedback. We have to give him the
Yeah.
feedback because the feedback's going to only help them with the next role, right?
Yes.
And I think like candidate experience, right? When you say candidate experience, it shouldn't be a new thing. It couldn't because they're people, right? So
Yeah.
treat them how you would want somebody to treat you. I know that's the old cliche, it's all cliche. Oh yeah, treat someone how you want to be treated. But honestly, that's true,
Yeah.
right? You don't want
It
someone
is true.
wasting your time. You don't want somebody giving you false hope. You don't want somebody. I'm not saying recruiters do this, but mislead you, lie, all that stuff, right? And that all builds into that candidate experience because when you said to a candidate, let's just use tech as an example, can't help you. I don't do tech roles. But you know
Mhm.
what? So and so over there does. Maybe you want to talk to them. They are going to tell people, hopefully, look, dealt with her, great, couldn't help me, but this is what she does. But if they have a bad experience with you, don't they? Isn't the statistics something like they'll tell 12 people or 12 times they'll repeat it? That's a crazy statistic, right? When someone
Yeah.
has a bad experience in any case, don't be that statistic, I guess.
Yeah. Don't be the statistic. Be honest. It might not feel great at the
Yep.
time, but you really are doing whoever you're talking to a favor. Just as you have to speak to that country manager and give him the feedback, it will help him because if it is something that he's doing or saying in an interview that is giving a certain impression, it would help him to know that that is what's happening. So in his next interview, he can work on not
Yeah.
leaving that
And just be
impression.
aware of it, right? I
Yeah.
know we're coming up to time. I've got one final question to you.
Yeah.
Your good old crystal ball. Look into the future. What are the primary goals for Career Connections, and how do you plan to continue driving growth while staying true to the values that have defined your business to date?
Well, I think the way I've been doing it for the last almost 30 years, winning clients and candidates over one at a time,
Love that.
making sure that we're treating them all with respect, integrity, that they feel that they're not talking to an automaton, that they're going to get real information and thoughtful, real solutions to whatever their problem
I
is.
love that. Yeah,
Thank you.
that you just so because when I ask this question, I get so many different answers, and all of them are very,
Uh-huh.
very valid. But I love what you just said. One client, one candidate at a time.
Yeah.
Right. I absolutely love that. Zach, this has been brilliant. We could have carried on. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share?
We've shared so much. I honestly cannot think of anything else
Fantastic.
that I want to share right now. It's been great. Thank you so much for
You're
having
welcome. If
me.
someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do it? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, or they can email me, zag at careerconnectionsinc.com. LinkedIn is probably the easiest because you just need to go into LinkedIn and click on Zag Dutton and send me a quick
Oh,
message. I respond to all messages.
fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Zach, thank you ever so much for your time. Really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. You as well. Have a wonderful
And you
day. Stay
take
safe.
it. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Talent Titans, brought to you by Recruitment Professional Forum, where they're building a grassroots community for professionals and leaders in the recruitment industry to collaborate, advocate, and advance the profession. If you liked or were inspired by what you heard, make sure to follow, subscribe, and even leave a review. It lets more talented recruiters like you find the show. Until next time, keep on being a talent titan.